So Paul Messerschmidt, if you would come up, who's going to describe the property assessed clean energy, and then we're going to all break and go to lunch on the fourth floor. So there you go. This thing screams. So
okay, thank you, Susan. Thank you, panel. Thank you, all of you who got up early to be here at this interesting facility. My name is Paul Messerschmidt. I've got some slides up there. Here we go. I've given this presentation and taken a lot longer than 5 minutes, and I will promise that anybody who wants a longer presentation, I will be happy to make that and do that discussion. But I know we've had a brief introduction to PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. It's not something new. I wish we could say we invented it here in Florida, but we did not. But we're going to take it and make it even better. I have about 20 years of background in the energy business, so I'm the energy guy. But I have also worked in the policy and finance world, so hopefully I can touch on some of these key themes, all the way back to some energy work I did in Massachusetts and responsible for about 60 million square feet of institutional and commercial space and all of the energy aspects associated with that. So we're going to run through some slides real quickly, and we can have a conversation when those are done. So next slide, please. PACE is sometimes called a number of things: financing district, municipal financing district. You can read all these. We've gone through Senate bill, House bill. Special districts are not new. Florida has, they grow like weeds. We've got over 1,600 of them here in Florida. So we're using an existing structure to build, and now we're just going to put energy into that mix. Next slide, please. The purpose, three primary things. We've heard these: renewable energy technologies, energy efficiency, and then the hurricane hardening. Next slide. Just to quote from the preamble of the slide, I mean, it is the public policy of the state of Florida to do these key important things, and PACE creates a platform for us to be able to do this. Next slide. PACE is not just some couple of wild green tree-hugging folks' initiatives. It's been endorsed by a whole list of folks. I'm sure you can find somebody on that list that you know and respect. We had 119 state representatives support it. We only had 31. That's not unanimous in the Senate. We can have a discussion as to what happened to those 4 people. But you know, all the way from the White House on down. So it's got support. I didn't put any green groups on this list because I think we can agree that those folks are supporting this. We're here today because it's the business community who needs to get this message, who needs to understand what this is, that this is self-sustaining on it and works on its own. We're not waiting for money from Tallahassee. We're not waiting for money from Washington. I'd love to say that's going to happen, but this is a business proposition. So next slide, please. Quick rundown. We had one of the key sponsors of the legislation. A couple of steps left to go. This has to happen. This is a very important step that has to happen. For any of you who spent any time watching the legislative process, I will just say, Otto von Bismarck's German statesman's quote, if you don't read German, I did give you the translation there, but watching the political process can be a very painful process. Best left to the professionals. Next slide, please. Again, we did not invent PACE, but it is catching on like wildfire. 2008, 2009, it's moving across the country. Several other of these states have legislation in front of their regulatory and legislative bodies, so we're going to see this keep coming because Washington realizes and the states realize that this is a real opportunity. So we've got 18 states who are already on board. I'm going to come back to Colorado in a second. Next slide, please. If you take away nothing from the presentation today, and especially those of you in the business community or need to talk to your friends or other folks to support it, this is the slide. This is your takeaway slide. PACE is not a tax. It may appear in your tax bill. It is not a tax. It is not a subsidy. We're not looking for Washington to give us money. We're not looking for Tallahassee to give us money. This is a self-financing mechanism overcoming a market barrier which has heretofore, I think, minimized or reduced the amount of energy efficiency and conservation and renewable programs that we've otherwise seen. It's voluntary. It's opt-in. If you want to do it, that's great. If you don't want to do it, that's fine too. So, and it has no impact on the bond rating of the community, and we're not looking for the support for state and local government, though there may be some issues I know we talked about here that could challenge that just a little bit. But this is the takeaway slide. If there's a takeaway slide today, next please. There's a bunch of steps in the process to go. Tallahassee has given us a structure. They've given us a framework. They've given us a platform. Now the work is for those of us seated here in the room. Number one step, and I'm not going to go through the rest of them, is we need a city or a county ordinance or resolution to make PACE happen in our local community. We're going to have to educate people as to what it is and, most importantly, what it is not. Then the process, and we can go through this, but we don't have time right now. Next slide, please. Key benefits, it's tied to the property, not the borrower. I don't have to go to the bank and explain to them about what's going on. The market barriers have often been it's a longer repayment period, and at least in the case of Colorado, 6% financing. This is why it becomes self-financing. And then the funding comes through the special district. So in terms of the waste, fraud, abuse issues, if I'm a contractor, I'm not waiting for Mr. and Mrs. Smith to write me a check. It's all coming out of this special district. Next slide, please. A list of measures, they're in the legislation. You can all read this. The usual suspects, we can flip through this. Next slide, please. Pretty much everything that counts. Now, I took this from the Boulder stuff. I don't think we're going to have a lot of people putting in wood pellet stoves, but pretty much anything that we would think should be on the list tends to be on the list. And of course, here in Florida, we get the wind-resistant improvements. Next slide. On top of the PACE program, there are several opportunities for leverage. The utility companies, I think, are going to be an important component in this process because they already have programs. They do energy audits. They have rebate programs. They have efficiency programs. We need to leverage off of that. So we take every dollar we use in the PACE program, leverage it with utility programs. There are tax credits. Again, a whole list of other places. And so that's where the front-end process needs to give a lot of thought so we can make maximum impact on the PACE program. Next slide, please. If there's one other slide that's a takeaway, and we're going to come back to this number, this is a top-down analysis someone else has done on green jobs. If only 1% participation, this number, and that's a B, it's not a mistake, and these are the number of direct and indirect job years that we can assume. 5%, this is like, 5 home runs, this is like a perfect game against the Rays. So not likely to happen, but, so next slide. But remember that number there. There are some government issues, special districts, special assessments. I'm not going to go into those details. Minor issue is our constitutional amendment we passed in 2008 said renewables are non-taxable, but we don't have a bill out of the House and Senate to codify that. That's a secondary issue. Next slide. You don't have to read all this. This is just to show you we had a discussion. Kevin commented on this before. Kevin and I are probably the only people who have read all 200 pages of the Boulder County offering prospectus. I've had that conversation. There's actually 2 of those. I didn't want to kill any more trees. This is the cover page. What's important is bond rating A+. Now, this date isn't as, you may not understand this, but this is 2009. If you remember from the earlier slide, Colorado passed their PACE legislation in 2008. In less than a year, they went from legislation at their state government to having their first bond offering. They had a second one. Next slide. Just a few months later, as Kevin indicated, there's a third one. It's an open enrollment process. And one thing, this is just residential for Colorado. They're also doing commercial property. And so I'll come to that as an important theme as well. Next slide. Here's just a quick pie chart of what Boulder, Colorado did. I have done an analysis. I have a list of every property that was improved, every improvement that was made with amounts down to the penny. So I've looked at this from the bottom up. Again, I guess that's me as the engineer looking at these numbers. But it's not everyone doing PV, though that's important. It's windows, it's roofing, it's insulation. Next slide, please. If I take the Boulder, Colorado initiative and take that and just multiply that times, there are 290,000 people in Boulder County, and then ramp it up to the state of Florida, and I truly think that this can happen in Florida. I don't think there's anything special about Colorado. In less than 24 months, I'm convinced we can have 36,000 properties involved. In Boulder, the average improvement was $16,000 per property. again, that's the right number. I didn't misenter it and create the chaos that we saw on Wall Street last week when someone mixed up millions and billions. That's a real number. Here's the tax revenue associated with spending these dollars, and here's the job years. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Paul, you just showed me a slide with $1.2 billion. Now you're only showing me $590 million. But as I said, Boulder has a third initiative at the residential level. They also have a program at the commercial level that hasn't been included in here. And then again, the multiplier effect, when you figure in the fact that taxes, my dollar spend versus my improvement is a huge multiplier. So I truly believe that $1 billion is a reasonable number in 24 months. Next slide. That's not. There's some beta testing that's being done to go house by house, take the Google Map and Zillow and calculate the energy intensity house by house. We're working with some folks out of Gainesville. Next slide. And I can actually drill down with real data and actual energy consumption. That's for another presentation. Next slide. I think we're coming in for a landing here. All I ask is let's continue the conversation. For those of you who are on Twitter, PACE411, PACE information, PACE Florida. Use hashtags of PACE if you're going to do any of this stuff. Contact me, and I'll finish up with my final slide. I took the entire text of the PACE bill here in Florida and created what's called a word cloud, and the size of each word is proportionate to the frequency with which that word appears in the bill. So I did not write this program, I just plugged it in, but just to sort of let you know where PACE is going. So thank you for the chance to talk. I'll be happy to carry on the conversation. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about, but the work now starts with those of you who are assembled in the room. Thanks for listening.
And now